She was being laughed at in a room full of strangers for finishing her dinner. "You ate both plates?" Her date said it loud, so the next table could laugh too. And they did. Tessa Brandt was 36, size 20, the kind of woman the whole world looked straight through. She reached under the table for her purse to run, the way she always ran. Then a chair scraped back 3 tables away. The most feared Mafia boss in Miami stood up, and the entire restaurant went dead silent. "Apologize to her," Matteo Ferraro said. Now, but the cruel date was not the dangerous part of this night. Because within the hour, 4 men in the corner of that restaurant would plan a murder out loud, in a language they were certain not one living soul could understand. And the fat girl they were all laughing at, she understood every single word. She was about to become the only person on earth who could stop the bullet aimed straight at his heart. Let's go back 40 minutes to before any of it. Tessa hadn't wanted to come. The date was a dating app thing. Brett Dolan, 34, entrepreneur, a man whose profile had been all teeth and rented yachts. But Tessa's sister had begged her to put herself out there. "You can't just work and go home, Tess. You deserve someone." And some small, stubborn, hopeful part of Tessa, the part that survived everything, the part she could never quite kill, had thought, maybe this one's different. He wasn't different. She'd known it within 4 minutes. Brett had looked at her when she walked in the way men like Brett always looked at her. The flick of the eyes down and back up, the little tightening at the mouth, the visible recalculation. The photos must have been old. The photos must have been from the good angle. He'd ordered for both of them without asking. He'd spent the first 20 minutes talking about his exits and his runway and his ex who really let herself go. He'd checked his phone 11 times. And Tessa had sat there and been gracious because that was the other thing she'd survived into, a kind of bulletproof grace, a politeness so complete it was almost armor. She learned it young. When you grow up as the big girl, the soft one, the one the boys laugh about in the hallway, you learn to be unfailingly kind because kindness is the one thing they can never quite mock you for, even when they try. What Brett didn't know, what nobody at that restaurant knew, was who Tessa actually was underneath the nice dress and the quiet smile. Tessa Brandt was one of the most sought-after court and conference interpreters on the Eastern Seaboard. She spoke 6 languages fluently and could get by in 3 more. She'd interpreted for federal judges and visiting heads of state, and once, memorably, for a Vatican delegation. Her mind was a cathedral of language. She could hear a sentence in Russian and have it in English before the speaker finished breathing. And her first language, the one before all the others, the one her Sicilian grandmother had poured into her across a kitchen table that smelled like basil and bread, was not Italian. It was Sicilian, the old dialect, the deep one, the one even most Italians can't follow. That detail is going to matter very much in about 30 minutes. Hold on to it. But right then, none of it mattered. Right then, she was just a woman being laughed at for eating, reaching for her purse, getting ready to run. And then, 3 tables away, a chair scraped back across the marble floor. The man who stood was tall, silver coming in at the temples, in a charcoal suit that cost more than Tessa's car. But it wasn't the suit. It was the stillness. He moved like a man the whole world made room for, and the second he rose, every conversation in that restaurant died at once. The way birds go quiet before a storm. Everyone in Miami knew exactly who Matteo Ferraro was. And right now, he was looking at Brett the way a man looks at something he has already decided to remove. "Apologize to her," he said. His voice wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. Now, the whole room held its breath. Brett let out a weak, disbelieving little laugh, certain, for one last second, that this couldn't possibly be aimed at him. "I'm not going to ask you again," Matteo Ferraro said. Brett had gone the color of cold ash. His mouth opened and closed. His eyes darted around the restaurant, looking for an ally, and found 200 people very pointedly studying their plates. Look, man, it was a joke. We were just..." "You humiliated a woman in a room full of people because you felt small next to her," Matteo said. "That's not a joke. That's a confession." He took one step closer, and Brett flinched like he'd been struck. "Apologize. Use her name. Look at her when you do it." Brett turned to Tessa. His hands were shaking. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Now get up, Matteo said, and leave. The ladies' dinner is finished, and so are you. Brett got up so fast he knocked his own chair over. He didn't pick it up. He half walked, half ran for the door, and Tessa watched the man who'd spent the evening making her feel like nothing flee from the restaurant like a scolded boy, and she felt, to her own surprise, almost nothing. The humiliation was already draining out of her, replaced by something stranger. Because the dangerous man was looking at her now, and his whole face had changed. The granite was gone. What was underneath, it was unexpectedly gentle. Forgive me, he said. I had no right to insert myself. But I've spent my whole life watching small men try to make themselves bigger by stepping on someone, and I find I have no patience left for it. He gestured very slightly to the empty seat across from him. I won't be offended if you say no, but you shouldn't have to end the night alone because of him. Will you sit? Just to finish your wine. As strangers, Tessa Brandt looked at the most feared man in Miami, who had stood up for her when a room full of ordinary people had only laughed, and she did something she would never have predicted of herself. She picked up her wine glass, walked 3 tables over, and sat down across from him. As strangers, she agreed. His name was Matteo. He didn't offer the last name. He didn't have to. She knew it the way everyone in that city knew it, the way you know which water has sharks in it. She should have been afraid. Some sensible part of her was. But the larger part of her was simply, after a lifetime of being looked through, being looked at, and not the way Brett had looked at her. The way you look at a person you find genuinely interesting. They talked. God, they talked. About nothing at first. The food, the city, the absurd painting on the far wall. Then about more. He asked her what she did, and when she told him, his eyebrows went up, and he made her prove it. Said something quick and quiet in Italian, testing her, and she answered him in better Italian than his own, and then, because she couldn't help herself, switched to Sicilian, her grandmother's Sicilian, just to watch his face. He laughed, out loud, a real, startled laugh that turned heads, because apparently Matteo Ferraro did not laugh in public ever. My grandmother spoke like that, he said, something soft and wondering in his voice. I haven't heard the deep dialect since I was a boy. Where did you learn it? My nana's kitchen, she said. She used to say a language is a house you can carry. That as long as you keep the words, you can never really be homeless. She smiled. She was a wise woman. Also, she once chased my grandfather around the yard with a wooden spoon for an entire afternoon. So, complicated legacy. Matteo laughed again. You're not what I expected, he admitted. Nobody ever expects me, Tessa said. That's rather the whole point of me. What does that mean? She considered him for a moment. This dangerous, careful man who had emptied a room just by standing up, and decided, recklessly, to tell him the truth. It means people take one look at me and decide they already know the entire story. Big girl. Probably sad. Probably lonely. Probably grateful for any scrap of attention thrown her way. She turned her glass slowly. They're so busy reading the cover that they never once open the book. Brett did it tonight. Most people do. And the strange thing is, it's made me invisible in a way that turns out to be a kind of power. People say things in front of me they would never say in front of someone they actually saw. I have learned more secrets standing quietly in the corner of a room than most spies learn in a lifetime. Matteo had gone very still. That, he said slowly, is the most dangerous thing anyone has said to me in 10 years. And you said it like you were commenting on the weather. It is nothing, she said. It's just my Tuesday. No. He shook his head. In my world, the people who survive are the ones who notice. Everyone else dies young and surprised. I have spent 30 years and a great deal of blood learning to truly see what's in a room. He looked at her like she was something rare and precious. You were simply born able to do it. You just spent your whole life being told it didn't count because of the shape of the body it came wrapped in. And Tessa noticed, because noticing was her whole life, that the most dangerous man in Miami had a loneliness in him as deep as her own. 2 people who had been made to feel like the wrong shape for the world. Him too big in one way, her in another. Both of them sitting alone in beautiful rooms, used to being feared or laughed at, and starved utterly starved for the simple thing of being known. I have to be honest with you, he said after a while. I noticed you the moment you walked in. Before any of this, I watched that man treat you carelessly all night, and I told myself it was not my business. And then he opened his mouth one time, too many. He turned his wine glass slowly. I'm not a good man, Tessa. I want you to know that before this goes any further than a glass of wine. But I know the difference between a good man and a bad one. And I could not sit there and let a bad night happen to a woman who is the only genuinely real person in this entire room. You keep saying you're not a good man, Tessa said quietly. Like a warning label. Like if you say it first, it won't hurt as much when I figure it out for myself. Matteo went very still. I don't know if you're good, she went on. I've known you for 40 minutes. But I know you stood up in a room full of people who outnumbered you, and you did it for a stranger who could do absolutely nothing for you in return. That's not nothing. Bad men don't waste kindness on people who can't pay it back. She met his eyes and held them. I read people for a living, Matteo. It's the one thing I have never once been wrong about. And the man sitting across from me is lonelier and gentler than he wants a single soul on earth to know. For a long moment, he didn't speak. When he finally did, his voice had gone rough. You should be careful, he said, seeing people that clearly. One day you'll look straight through someone truly dangerous. I think I already have, she said. Tessa opened her mouth to say something else. And over his shoulder, at a dim table in the back corner, four men sat down. And one of them said something low and fast, in a dialect he was absolutely certain no one else in that restaurant could understand. Sicilian, the deep one, and Tessa Brandt heard every single word. She kept her face perfectly still. That was the interpreter's first skill. Never let your face show that you've understood something you weren't meant to hear. She'd done it in courtrooms and back rooms her whole career. She did it now, but her heart had started to slam, because the men in the corner were not talking about the menu. He's at the third table. The silver hair. Don't move until the back hallway clears, one of them said. Nunzio wants it done here, tonight, in front of people. Make the Ferraros feel it. The waiter by the kitchen is ours. He'll cut the cameras at 10 o'clock. We take Ferraro on his way to the cars. Then o'clock. Tessa's eyes flicked, just once, to the antique clock on the restaurant wall. 9:48. She had 12 minutes. 12 minutes before 4 armed men of the Aiello family put the man across from her, the only person in years to look at her like she mattered, into the ground in the parking lot of La Serena. And there was no one she could tell. She couldn't call out. She couldn't run for the door. The back hallway was watched, and the waiter was theirs. If she so much as changed her expression, they'd know they'd been heard, and they'd start early, and people would die in a crowded room. She had one weapon, the only weapon she'd ever truly had. She was the smartest, quietest, most underestimated person in the room. And not one of those 4 men would ever, in 1,000 years, imagine that the fat woman being laughed at for her dinner spoke their grandmother's tongue better than they did. Matteo, she said softly in Sicilian, smiling like she was telling him something sweet. Don't react. Keep looking at me exactly like you are now. Laugh in a second, like I've said something charming. To his enormous credit, Matteo Ferraro did not so much as blink. The granite came back into his face, but stayed behind his eyes, hidden. He smiled. He laughed right on cue. Talk to me, he murmured back in the old dialect. For men, the corner table behind you. Aiello family, she said, lifting her wine, hiding her lips behind the glass. They're going to kill you at 10 in the parking structure on your way to the cars. Your waiter, the one by the kitchen, is theirs. He cuts the cameras at 10. They want a public. Someone named Nunzio gave the order. She set the glass down, laughed lightly at nothing. You have 11 minutes. For one heartbeat. Matteo Ferraro looked at her with an expression she would never forget for the rest of her life. Not fear, not even surprise. Awe. You understood them, he breathed. I understand everyone, she said. It's the only thing I've ever been good at. Now, are you going to sit there being impressed, or are we going to live? And the most feared man in Miami grinned at her like a boy who just found buried treasure, and said, I like that word in your mouth. Then, lower, follow my lead. And Tessa, whatever happens, you stay behind me. I did not find you tonight to lose you in a parking lot. What happened next, Tessa would tell people for years, was the closest she ever came to conducting an orchestra. Matteo didn't panic. He didn't run. He did something far more dangerous. He made a single quiet phone call from his lap, thumbing a number without looking, murmuring 3 words in Italian that Tessa caught. Basement, now quiet. And then he set the phone down and poured them both more wine like a man with all the time in the world. My men are below us, he told her softly. 6 of them. They've been there all night. I never go anywhere without them. The Aiellos think I'm alone and unguarded because that is exactly what I wanted a careless enemy to think. His eyes glittered. They came here to ambush me. They walked into mine instead. But I need to know one more thing, and only you can get it for me. He leaned in, the picture of a man flirting. I need to know if there are more of them outside. How many guns are waiting in that garage? And there's only one way to find out without tipping them. Tessa understood instantly. Of course there was a way. There was always a way for her. For 1 second, just one, the old voice spoke up in her. The voice that had run her entire life. Sit down. Stay small. Don't make yourself a target. You barely know this man, and his world is not your world. Let the dangerous people handle the dangerous things. And then a different voice answered it. A newer one, or maybe a very old one. Maybe her nana's, drifting up from a kitchen that smelled of basil and bread. You have spent 36 years being walked past like furniture. Tonight, for once, that is the most powerful thing in this room. Stop apologizing for it. Use it. She rose, smoothed her dress, and walked. Not toward the exit, but toward the back, toward the ladies' room, a route that took her right past the corner table. She moved the way she'd moved her whole life. Heavily, apologetically, invisibly, a big woman shuffling past, beneath notice, beneath suspicion. The 4 men didn't even pause their conversation as she passed. Why would they? She was nothing. She was furniture. And in the 8 seconds it took her to walk by, they said everything. 3 more in the garage, 2 by the south stair. After it's done, we go out the loading dock. Nunzio's waiting at the boat. She heard it all. She filed it all. She used the restroom, washed her hands, checked her lipstick, gave herself one long look in the mirror. Look at you, she thought, look at what you can do, and walked back past the table again, gathering the rest. By the time she sat back down across from Matteo, she had the whole map. 3 in the garage, 2 on the south stair. A boat. A man named Nunzio waiting on it. Thinking tonight was the night he finally ended the Ferraros. She told Matteo all of it in 90 seconds of whispered Sicilian, smiling, laughing, the very picture of a woman falling for a charming stranger. You, Matteo said when she finished, very quietly, are the most extraordinary woman who has ever lived. Tell me that again when we're not about to be murdered, she said. But she was glowing, and they both knew it. It was almost gentle, the way it ended. That was the part that surprised her most. At 1 minute to 10, the lights in La Serena flickered, the waiter cutting the cameras right on schedule, just like the Aiellos planned. But the Aiellos' plan had been built on a map of the world that no longer existed, because a woman they dismissed as furniture had quietly handed their enemy the entire board. When the 4 men rose to make their move, Matteo's 6 were already behind them. When the 3 in the garage reached for their guns, they found Matteo's people already in position at the angles Tessa had marked. There was a brief, ugly, contained few minutes that Matteo made very sure Tessa did not see. He pressed her gently into a banquette behind him, his broad back a wall between her, and all of it, exactly as he'd promised, murmuring eyes on me, just me, until it was over. When she looked up, it was finished. Nova Istander's hit. The restaurant, which had emptied in the confusion, was quiet, and the Aiello ambush, the one that was supposed to make the whole city watch the Ferraros bleed, had simply, silently, ceased to exist. As for Nunzio Aiello, waiting on his boat in the marina for the call that would tell him his enemy was dead, the call he got instead was from Matteo himself. Tessa only heard Matteo's side of it. He spoke in calm, quiet Sicilian, and what he said was this. Nunzio, it's Matteo. Your men aren't coming. They were heard, every word, from the moment they sat down, by someone you would never in your life have thought to watch. You lost tonight before you ever began, because you, like every man I have ever buried, looked at a room and decided who and it mattered. You decided wrong. A pause. Go home, Nunzio. Tonight, I'm feeling generous, because tonight has been, against all odds, the best night of my life. Don't make me regret it. He hung up, and then he turned to Tessa Brandt, who had saved his life with nothing but her grandmother's kitchen and a lifetime of being underestimated, and he got down. This man, this Don, this person the whole city feared. He got down on one knee in the middle of that empty restaurant, took her hand, and pressed his forehead to her knuckles. You stood up for me, he said, his voice rough. I stood up for your dignity in a restaurant and thought I was being a gentleman. And then you stood between me and death using the only weapon you've ever had, which is the most beautiful mind I have ever encountered. We are even, Tessa. No, we will never be even. I owe you everything. Get up, she said softly, but she was crying and laughing, and her hand was shaking in his. People don't kneel for me. Then people have been fools, Matteo said. Every single one of them. For your entire life. For a moment, neither of them moved. The empty restaurant ticked and settled around them. Somewhere a candle guttered out. And Tessa Brandt, who had walked into that room, expecting to end the night, crying alone in a parking garage, stood in the quiet wreckage of an ambush that never happened and felt something she had not felt in longer than she could remember. Safe, seen, and, strangest of all, proud, not of the dress or the careful grace or any of the thousand things she'd spent her life performing so the world might forgive her for taking up space. Proud of her mind, the thing they had all looked past, the thing that had just kept a man alive. Nah, she thought you were right. The words really were a house. And, tonight, they kept us both standing. Brett, in case you're wondering, did not get away clean. His humiliated little exit from the restaurant had been the last time anyone in Miami treated Brett Dolan as a man worth knowing. The story of a night he mocked a woman's dinner and got run out of La Serena by Matteo, Ferraro spread through every social circle he'd ever tried to climb. And within a month he'd taken his exits and his runway, and moved to Scottsdale, where presumably he is still ordering for women without asking. Some men don't get a bullet. Some men just get to stay exactly who they are. That's its own kind of justice. But that's not how the night ended for Tessa. The night ended at 4 a.m, on a quiet stretch of beach, with 2 pairs of shoes in the sand and the ocean going silver at the edges with the first hint of dawn. I have to ask you something, Matteo said, and I need you to know I have never asked anyone this in my life. He took a breath, this fearless man, suddenly nervous as a teenager. That date tonight was supposed to be the worst night of your life. The cruel man. The laughing room. Let me give you the one you deserved instead. Dinner. A real one. Where the only thing anyone says about your appetite is that they hope you're hungry, because I intend to feed you like a queen for the rest of your life. He looked at her, and the whole armored city of him was gone, and there was just a man asking, "Will you let me take you out, Tessa Brandt? Properly. As more than strangers?" And Tessa Brandt, the big girl, the soft one, the one they laughed at, the one who turned out to hold a whole city's safety in the cathedral of her mind, looked at the dawn and looked at him and smiled. On one condition, she said, "Anything. You let me order for myself." He threw his head back and laughed, that real laugh, the one she'd already decided she would spend her life collecting. "Yes," Matteo Ferraro said. "God, yes. Order the whole menu. Order it twice. I'll be the luckiest man in Miami either way." And as the sun came up over the water, the most feared man in the city walked down the beach hand in hand with the woman the world had overlooked. The woman who heard everything, who missed nothing, who had been exactly enough all along, and was only ever waiting for someone smart enough to notice. So that's the story of the worst date that became the best night, and the quiet woman everyone underestimated, right up until she became the only thing standing between a good-as-dead man and the bullet with his name on it. Now I want to hear from you, and be honest with me down in the comments. When Matteo told Brett to apologize, did he go easy on him? Some of you are going to say that man deserved a whole lot worse than a ruined reputation. And some of you are going to say walking away with your dignity is the best revenge there is. Tell me which one you are. I genuinely want to know. And if Tessa's story reminded you that the people who get overlooked are usually the ones holding the most power of all, do me a favor before you go. Tap the like button. Share this with someone who needs to remember that being underestimated is a weapon, not a wound, and subscribe so you don't miss what comes next. Because Nunzio is still out there on that boat, and something tells me he is not going to let this go. That story is coming very soon. You won't want to miss it.